You are a woman, young and trembling, pressed against the cold earth in a tent that smells of sweat and horsehide. It's 1020 AD, and the air is thick with the acrid tang of smoke from a burning Tangut village somewhere beyond the canvas walls. Your wrists ache, bound by coarse rope that bites into your skin, and your heart pounds so loudly you're sure the men outside can hear it. Hooves thunder past, shaking the ground beneath you, and the guttural shouts of Mongol warriors pierce the night, harsh, triumphant, and terrifyingly close. You don't know if it's your village they've razed or another, but the screams you heard earlier still echo in your ears, sharp and fleeting like the crack of a whip. A shadow moves at the tent's entrance, a silhouette broad and unyielding, and you shrink back, your breath catching as the flap is thrown open. The man who enters is not just any warrior. His eyes, hard as flint, scan the dim space, and though you've never seen him before, you know who he is. Everyone does. Genghis Khan, the conqueror whose name is whispered in terror from the steppes to the cities of the Jinn. He doesn't speak, but his presence fills the tent like a storm, and you realize with a sickening lurch that you are not here by accident. You are a prize, a spoil of war, and the weight of that truth presses down on you, heavier than the ropes ever could. Before diving into these forgotten stories of survival and suffering, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. The night is endless, and the camp is a cacophony of clinking metal, crackling fires, and the low moans of the defeated. You're not alone in the tent. Other women, their faces streaked with dirt and fear, huddle nearby, their eyes darting like trapped animals. Some are from your village, others from places you'll never know. The Mongols don't care about your names or your stories. To them you are currency, a means to bind their empire tighter or to sate the appetites of its warriors. The man who entered, Genghis Khan, born Temujin in 1162 AD on the banks of the Onan River, stands motionless for a moment, his fur-lined cloak catching the faint glow of a single oil lamp. His face is weathered, his jaw set, but there's a flicker of something in his gaze, calculation perhaps, or a hunger that goes beyond the battlefield. He doesn't touch you, not yet. Instead, he gestures to one of his guards, a hulking figure with a scar running from temple to chin, and mutters something in a tongue you don't understand. The guard nods and drags one of the other women to her feet, her muffled cry swallowed by the noise outside. You want to scream, to fight, but your body betrays you, frozen by the terror of what comes next. This is not a tale of battles and conquests alone, though those are the stories history loves to tell. The Mongol Empire, forged by Genghis Khan from 1206 to his death in 1227 AD, stretched from the Pacific to the Caspian Sea, a vast swath of land built on the backs of warriors and the suffering of the conquered. But beneath the tales of cavalry charges and burning cities lies a darker truth, one rarely spoken of in the chronicles: the systematic use of women as tools of war, power, and pleasure. The Secret History of the Mongols, a 13th century text and one of the few near contemporary Mongol sources, doesn't dwell on these details, but Persian and Chinese accounts written by those who witnessed the Mongol tide hint at the scale of it. Women like you, taken from villages in Shisha, Khwarezmia, or the Jin state, were not just casualties of war but instruments in Genghis Khan's grand design. To understand this, we must go back to the man himself and the world that shaped him. Temujin's early life was no stranger to hardship. Born into the Borjigan clan, he was the son of Yesugei, a minor chieftain, and Herlun, a woman abducted from the Merkut tribe. By 1171 AD, when Temujin was just 9, his father was poisoned by rivals, and his tribe abandoned his family to the steppes' merciless embrace. Herlun raised her children in near poverty, teaching them to survive on roots and small game, while dodging enemies who saw them as threats. Temujin's own wife, Berta, was kidnapped by the Merkut in 1181 AD, a wound that would scar him deeply. He rescued her with the help of allies like Jamukha and Togurul, but when she returned, she was pregnant. The child Yochi, born in 1182 AD, was accepted as Temujin's own, though whispers of doubt lingered. This moment, raw and personal, shaped the man who would become Genghis Khan. The steppe was a place where power was fragile, loyalty scarce, and women were often pawns in alliances or vendettas. Temujin learned early that to control was to survive. By 1206 AD, after years of brutal campaigns, Temujin had united the Mongol tribes and taken the title Genghis Khan, meaning universal ruler. His empire was not just a military machine but a system of control, and women were central to it. The Mongols, nomadic and pragmatic, saw marriage and concubinage as tools to bind tribes and secure loyalty. Genghis had 4 principal wives, Buter, Kulan, Yesui, and Yesugan, each overseeing a camp or ordo within his massive harem. Historians like Basanjov Terbish, in his 2023 book, Sex in the Land of Genghis Khan, estimate that Genghis's harem numbered around 500 women, though only 44 were officially recorded as wives or concubines. These women were often daughters of defeated rulers, like Chukka of the Tangut or the Jin Emperor's daughter, offered as tribute to spare their people further slaughter. Each night Genghis would visit different tents, his movements guarded by the Keshig, an elite force of 10,000 men who ensured his safety and tracked his whereabouts. The harem wasn't just about desire, it was a political institution, a way to weave conquered peoples into the Mongol tapestry. Imagine the weight of that life. You're one of those women now, pulled from your home in a raid on Wulahai in 120 AD. The city's walls, once thought impregnable, crumbled under Mongol siege engines, and now you're here, in a yurt that smells of damp wool and burning herbs. Your dress, once fine silk, is torn at the hem, and the cold seeps through the thin fabric, chilling your bones. Outside, the camp is alive with movement, horses snorting, men laughing, the clatter of iron as weapons are sharpened. You hear the other women whispering, their voices low and urgent. Some speak of escape, but the steppe is vast, and the Mongols are relentless. Others speak of survival, of learning to please, to carve out a place in this new world. You see their faces in the flickering light, a girl no older than 16, her eyes hollow, an older woman, her hands calloused, muttering prayers in a language you don't know. They are all different, yet bound by the same fate. The Mongol system was ruthless but calculated. Women were divided into categories: principal wives, concubines, and slaves. Principal wives like Berta held status, managing their own households and advising on tribal matters. Concubines, often high-born captives, lived in relative luxury but had no freedom. Slaves, like you might be, faced the worst fates: domestic labour, sexual servitude, or trade in the bustling markets of the Silk Road. The 13th century Persian chronicler Juvaini, who served the Mongols, wrote of women being traded like livestock, their value measured in horses or gold. Some were forced to serve soldiers, their bodies used to provide comfort after battles, as described in a 2025 article on vocal.media. Others, deemed beautiful or exotic, were sent to Genghis's harem, where they lived in a golden cage, as the same article puts it, their lives dictated by the Khan's whims. Falling out of favour could mean demotion, exile, or death. The power dynamics were stark. Men like Genghis held absolute control, but women too wielded influence in subtle ways. Berta, his first wife, was a trusted advisor. Her counsel sought even in matters of war. Mongol women in general, as Terbish notes, were active in public life, managing trade, driving wagons, even fighting alongside men. Yet this freedom was not universal. Captive women had no such agency. You feel it now, the weight of eyes on you, the unspoken expectation that you must perform, please, survive. The guard returns, his boots crunching on the packed earth, and points to you. Your stomach twists, but you force yourself to stand, your legs shaking. The other women look away, their silence louder than any scream. Genghis's sexual practices were not just personal indulgences, they were strategic. By taking women from every conquered tribe, he ensured his bloodline spread across his empire, a genetic legacy that modern DNA studies confirm. A 2003 study in the American Journal of Human Genetics found that 8% of men in the former Mongol Empire, roughly 16 million today, carry a Y chromosome marker likely tied to Genghis and his sons. This was no accident. He fathered hundreds, perhaps thousands of children, though only 9 with Berti are named in the records. 4 sons, Joki, Chagatai, Ogede, and Tolui, and 5 daughters. The rest, born to concubines and slaves, were often unrecorded, their mothers' names lost to history. You wonder as you're led from the tent if your child, should you bear one, will be one of those forgotten, a shadow in the empire's vast lineage. The camp stretches before you, a sea of yurts under a sky heavy with stars. The air is sharp, carrying the scent of roasted mutton and the faint metallic tang of blood. Warriors move through the shadows, their laughter rough, their faces flushed with kumis, the fermented mare's milk that flows freely after a victory. You're taken to a larger yurt, its entrance flanked by guards whose spears glint in the firelight. Inside, the air is warmer, thick with the smell of incense and fur. Genghis is there, seated on a low stool, his hands resting on his knees. He doesn't look at you at first, his attention on a map spread before him, its edges curling like dried leaves. You notice the lines on his face, the grey in his braid, signs of a man who has spent decades in the saddle, fighting, conquering, surviving. He speaks, his voice low, almost gentle, but there's a hardness beneath it, like stone under soft earth. You don't understand the words, but the intent is clear. This is not a negotiation. The Mongols' treatment of women was not unique to Genghis. His successors, like Ogedei, who ruled from 1229 to 1241 AD, continued these practices. The Persian chronicler Rashid al-Din, writing in the early 14th century, describes Ogedei's punishment of the Oirat people in 1237 AD. 4,000 girls were raped by soldiers, their families forced to watch, before being distributed as slaves. The brutality was a message, a reminder of Mongol dominance. Yet, as Terbish argues, Mongol society was not uniformly cruel. Adultery, for instance, was punished harshly during Genghis's early conquests, often with death to prevent feuds, but later laws were lenient, imposing fines instead. Single women and widows faced little scrutiny. Their sexual freedom a stark contrast to the rigid Confucian norms of Song China, where foot-binding crippled women to emphasize frailty. Mongol women, when not captives, were strong, practical, integral to the nomadic life. But for you, a captive, that strength is a distant dream. Days blur into weeks. You learn the rhythms of the camp, the pre-dawn rustle of warriors preparing for a raid, the clatter of wooden carts as the ordo moves across the steppe, the quiet moments when the women share stories in hushed tones. You learn to read the Khan's moods, the way his eyes soften when he speaks of Bertie, or harden when news of rebellion reaches him. You learn to survive, to bury the grief for the life you lost. Some women, you notice, adapt faster, their voices growing bolder, their eyes sharper. One, a Khwarezmian named Aishia, whispers to you one night about a rumour that Genghis once shared a blanket with his rival Jamuka as a young man, a bond of brotherhood that ended in betrayal and death. The story feels like a warning. Loyalty is fleeting, and even the mighty can fall. By 1215 AD, Genghis's armies had sacked Zhongdu, the Jin capital, and turned their sights on the Khwarezmian Empire. The 1219 invasion of Otrar was a bloodbath. After the governor Inalchuk provoked Genghis by executing his envoys, the Mongols razed the city, disemboweling its citizens in search of hidden wealth, as recounted in a 2025 Sky History article. Women like you were taken in droves, some to the harem, others to the markets. The trade in female slaves, as vocal media notes, was a cornerstone of the Mongol economy, thriving on human suffering. You see it now in the faces of new captives brought to the camp, their eyes mirroring your own terror from that first night. The cycle repeats, relentless as the steppe wind. Yet there are moments of strange humanity. One evening, as the camp settles near the Helen Mountains, a Mongol woman, not a captive but one born to the tribe, brings you a bowl of warm mare's milk. Her hands are rough, her face lined, but her gesture is kind. She says nothing, but her presence feels like a tether to something softer, something the conquest haven't crushed. You learn her name is Kulan, a minor wife, and she teaches you a few words in Mongol, her voice patient. These moments are rare, but they keep you from breaking entirely. As the years pass, Genghis grows older, his campaigns fiercer. By 1227 AD, he's besieging the Shisha again, determined to crush their rebellion. You hear whispers that he's unwell, that a fall from a horse the previous year has left him weaker. On August 18, 1227 AD, he dies in his camp near Yinchuan, his body carried back to Mongolia in secret. The chronicles, like those of Marco Polo, claim his funeral was a slaughter. 2,000 slaves killed to ensure his burial place remained hidden. You're not there when it happens. You're still in the Ordo, now under the watchful eye of one of his sons. The harem doesn't dissolve, but its purpose shifts. Without the Khan, the women are adrift. Some forgotten, others traded to new masters. You wonder if you'll ever see your home again, or if the steppe will claim you as it has so many others. The legacy of Genghis Khan's sexual practices is not just in the children he fathered or the women he claimed. It's in the silence of the chronicles, the stories left unwritten. The secret history of the Mongols glorifies his conquests but glosses over the human cost. Persian and Chinese sources like Juvaini and Rashid al-Din offer glimpses of the truth, but even they are filtered through the lens of their own agendas. Today, the echoes of that suffering linger, not in history books but in the DNA of millions, in the stories of women whose names were never recorded. You, the woman in the tent, are one of them. Your life a thread in the vast tapestry of an empire built on blood and ambition. As the firelight fades and the camp grows quiet, you sit alone, the ropes long gone but their weight still heavy on your wrists. The stars above are cold, indifferent, and the steppe stretches endlessly before you. You think of that first night, the terror, the shadow at the tent's entrance. You survived, but at what cost? The man who claimed you is gone, his empire fracturing, but the scars he left on you, on countless others, endure. They are not spoken of, not written, but they are there, etched in the silence of the night, in the wind that carries the cries of the forgotten across the endless steppe. Genghis Khan, scriptu tot tholn tefand pagin dulseu. Web 488, make it longer. You are a woman, barely 20, your body pressed against the cold, packed earth inside a yurt that reeks of damp horsehide and sour sweat. It's Palsam the 1 AD, somewhere on the windswept plains of the Jisha kingdom, and the night is alive with terror. The air stings your lungs, heavy with the choking smoke of a village, maybe yours burning beyond the canvas walls. Your wrists burn, bound by ropes that dig into your flesh like teeth, and your pulse hammers in your ears, drowning out the distant wails of the defeated. Hooves pound the ground outside, a relentless drumbeat, and the guttural laughter of Mongol warriors slices through the dark, sharp as a blade. You try to shrink into the shadows, but there's nowhere to hide. The tent flap rips open and a figure steps inside, his silhouette broad and unyielding against the firelight. His eyes, cold as the steppe winter, lock onto you, and though you've never seen him before, you know him. Everyone does. Genghis Khan, born Temujin in 1162 AD, the man whose name is a curse whispered from the Gobi to the Jin cities. His presence is a weight, a storm trapped in human form, and as he steps closer, the truth crashes over you. You are not here by chance. You are a spoil of war, a living trophy, and the ropes binding you are nothing compared to the chains of his will. Before diving into these forgotten stories of survival and suffering, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. The camp outside is a living beast, its pulse made of clinking iron, crackling fires, and the low moans of those who've lost everything. You're not alone in the yurt. Other women huddle nearby, their faces pale and streaked with ash, their eyes darting like cornered deer. Some are from your village, their familiar features twisted by fear. Others are strangers, their origins as distant as the stars above. The Mongols don't care who you were. A farmer's daughter, a merchant's wife, a noble's sister. To them you are chattel, a means to cement alliances, sate desires, or fill the coffers of their empire. Genghis stands still for a moment, his fur-lined cloak catching the dim flicker of an oil lamp. His face is a map of scars and weathered lines, his braid streaked with grey, but his gaze is sharp, calculating. There's a hunger in it, not just for flesh but for power, for the threads that bind his empire together. He murmurs something to a guard, a towering man with a face carved by a jagged scar, and the guard seizes a woman from the corner. Her cry is brief, choked off as she's dragged into the night. You want to scream, to claw at the earth, but your body is a traitor, frozen by the weight of what's to come. This is not just a story of conquest, though the chronicles love to sing of Genghis Khan's battles, his cavalry thundering across the steppe, his armies toppling cities like Zhongdu in 1215 AD or Samarkand in 1220 AD. The Mongol Empire, forged from 1206 to his death in 1227 AD, was a colossus, stretching from the Sea of Japan to the Caspian, built on blood and ambition. But beneath the tales of swords and siege engines lies a shadow history, one the scribes barely touched. The secret history of the Mongols, written in the 13th century, glorifies the Khan's triumphs but skims over the human cost, especially for women. Persian chroniclers like Javaini and Rashid al-Din, writing in the 13th and 14th centuries, offer glimpses of the truth, as do Chinese records from the Jin and Song dynasties. Women like you, torn from homes in Shishai, Khwarezmia, or the Kipchak steppes, were not mere collateral damage. You were tools in a vast machine, used to bind tribes, reward warriors, and ensure the Khan's legacy. To understand this, we must trace the path of the man who became a myth, and the world that shaped him. Temujin's life began in hardship. Born in 1162 AD, on the banks of the Onon River to Yasuge, a minor chieftain of the Borjigan clan, and Hoelun, a woman stolen from the Merkit tribe. By 1171 AD, when he was 9, his father was poisoned by Tatar rivals, and his tribe abandoned his family to the steppe's cruelty. Hoelun raised her children on wild roots and small game, teaching Temujin to endure hunger and evade enemies who saw him as a threat. The steppe was a brutal school where loyalty was fleeting and power was won through strength or cunning. In 1181 AD, Temujin's young wife, Berte, was kidnapped by the Merkit, a wound that cut deeper than any blade. He rescued her with allies like Jamuka and Toggerul, but she returned pregnant. The child, Yochi, born in 1182 AD, was raised as his own, though whispers of doubt haunted their bond. This betrayal shaped Temujin's view of the world. Trust was a luxury, and control was survival. By 1206 AD, after years of warfare and betrayal, killing his half-brother Bekta, defeating Jamuka, and crushing the Naiman, he united the Mongol tribes and took the title Genghis Khan, universal ruler. His empire was a machine of conquest, but it was also a system of control, and women were its unseen gears. The Mongols, nomadic and pragmatic, used marriage and concubinage to forge alliances and subdue enemies. Genghis had 4 principal wives, Berta, Kulan, Yesui, and Yesogan, each managing an ordo, a mobile camp that was both household and political hub. His harem, as historian Barzanjav Terbish notes in his 2023 book Sex in the Land of Genghis Khan, may have numbered 500 women, though only 44 were recorded as wives or concubines. These women were often high-born captives like Chaka, daughter of the Tangut king, or the Jin emperor's sister, offered as tribute to spare their people. Each night Genghis moved between tents, his visits guarded by the Keshig, an elite force of 10,000 who tracked his every step. The harem was no mere indulgence, it was a political tool, binding conquered tribes to the Mongol yoke through blood and obligation. Picture yourself now, a captive from Wulahai, taken in 1207 AD, when Mongol siege engines shattered the city's walls. Your silk dress, once a gift from your father, is torn at the hem, and the steppes chill seeps through, numbing your fingers. The yurt smells of damp wool and burning herbs, a faint sweetness undercut by the tang of fear. Outside, the camp hums, horses snort, their breath steaming in the cold. Warriors sharpen blades, the grind of stone on iron a constant drone. The other women whisper, their voices brittle. A girl, barely 16, clutches her knees, her eyes empty. An older woman, her hands rough from years of labour, mutters prayers in a tongue you don't know. Some talk of escape, but the steppe is a vast prison, and Mongol scouts ride faster than hope. Others speak of survival, of learning to please, to carve out a sliver of safety. You see it in their faces, the slow death of who they were, replaced by something harder, sharper. The Mongol system was precise in its cruelty. Women were sorted like livestock, principal wives, concubines, slaves. Principal wives like Berta held power, managing trade and advising on tribal disputes. Concubines, often daughters of defeated rulers, lived in gilded cages, their status tied to the Khan's favour. Slaves, like you might be, faced grimmer fates, cooking, cleaning, or serving soldiers' baser needs. Giovanni, the Persian chronicler, wrote of women traded for horses or gold, their worth measured in markets from Karakoram to Samarkand. A 2025 Vocal.media article describes soldiers using captive women for comfort after battles, their bodies a reward for victory. Those deemed beautiful were sent to the harem, where life was softer but no less confined. To fall out of favour was to risk everything: demotion to slavery, exile to a distant camp, or a quiet, unmarked death. Power was a tightrope. Genghis held absolute control, but women like Berte wielded influence in the shadows. She advised on war and politics, her voice carrying weight even among generals. Mongol women, as Terbish notes, were integral to nomadic life, driving wagons, managing herds, sometimes fighting. Yet captives had no such freedom. You feel it now, the weight of eyes, the unspoken demand to perform, to survive. The scarred guard returns, his boots crunching, and points at you. Your stomach knots, but you stand, legs trembling. The other women avert their eyes, their silence a scream in itself. Genghis's sexual practices were strategic, not mere lust. By taking women from every tribe, Tangut, Khwarezmian, Kipchak, he wove his bloodline into his empire. A 2003 study in the American Journal of Human Genetics found that 8% of men in the former Mongol Empire, some 16 million today, carry a Y chromosome marker tied to Genghis and his sons. He fathered hundreds, perhaps thousands of children, though only 9 with Berta are named. 4 sons, Yokir, Chagatai, Ogedei, Tolui, and 5 daughters. The rest, born to concubines and slaves, faded into history, their mothers' names unrecorded. You wonder, as the guard leads you through the camp, if your child will be one of those shadows, lost to the steppe's vast memory. The camp sprawls under a sky thick with stars, the air sharp with the scent of roasted mutton and blood. Warriors move through the dark, their faces flushed with kumas, their laughter raw. You're taken to a grand yurt, its entrance flanked by guards with spears that gleam like fangs. Inside, the air is warm, heavy with incense and fur. Genghis sits on a low stool, his hands on his knees, a map before him curling at the edges. His face is lined, his braid greying, but his presence is a force, like the wind that bends the grass. He speaks, his voice low, almost soft, but it carries the weight of command. You don't understand the words, but the intent is clear. There is no choice here, only survival. This was not unique to Genghis. His sons and successors, like Ogedei R. in 11229–141 AD, continued the practice. Rashid al-Din records Ogedei's 11237 AD punishment of the Or-Arat, 4,000 girls raped before their families, then enslaved. The act was a message, a reminder of Mongol power, yet Mongol society was not all cruelty. Turbish notes that adultery, once punished by death to prevent feuds, later carried fines, and single women enjoyed freedoms unknown in Song China, where foot-binding symbolized fragility. But for captives, such freedoms were a myth. You learn this as days become weeks, as you memorize the camp's rhythms, the pre-dawn clatter of warriors, the creak of carts as the ordo moves, the hushed stories shared in the dark. You learn to read Genghis's moods, his eyes softening for Berta, hardening at rebellion. You bury your grief, your home a fading memory. Some women adapt faster. A Khwarezmian named Aisha, her eyes sharp as a hawk's, whispers one night of Genghis and Jamukha, brothers in arms who shared a blanket as youths, only for Temujin to order his death in 1205 AD. The story is a warning. Even the closest bonds break. By 1215 AD, Genghis sacks Zhongdu, and by 1219 AD, he turns on Khwarezmia after its governor, Inalchuk, slaughters his envoys. The 2025 Sky History article describes Otra's fall, citizens gutted, women enslaved. The slave trade, per vocal Mauda, was a Mongol lifeline thriving on human misery. You see it in the new captives, their eyes mirroring your own from that first night. Yet there are flickers of kindness. Near the Halen Mountains, a Mongol woman, Kwolun, brings you warm mare's milk. Her hands are rough, her face weathered, but her gesture is a lifeline. She teaches you Mongol words, her voice steady. These moments are rare, but they hold you together. By 1227 AD, Genghis, now aging, besieges Seashire again. Whispers say he's frail, injured from a fall. On August 18, 1227 AD, he dies near Yunchuan, his body spirited away. Marco Polo's accounts claim 2,000 slaves were killed to hide his grave. You're still in the Ordo, now under a son's gaze. The harem shifts, some women forgotten, others traded. You wonder if home is gone forever. The legacy of Genghis's practices is not just his children or conquests. It's in the silence of the chronicles, the women whose names vanished. Giovanni and Rashid al-Din hint at the truth, but the full weight lies in the unwritten. Millions today carry his blood, but the mothers are ghosts. You sit alone, the ropes gone but their ache lingering. The stars are cold, the steppe endless. You survived, but the scars remain, etched in the wind's howl, carrying the cries of the forgotten across the ages.